Hey guys, so I had the chapter 6, which was titled American Melting Pot or Chinese Hot Pot. And I wasn't really sure what the hot pot thing meant. I knew the melting pot was basically taking all cultures and ideas and things and backgrounds of people and melting them all into one American society, American culture here in the United States. The Chinese hot pot idea, I thought it was kind of interesting, and I actually prefer that more after I read it and kind of understood it a little bit more, which is basically people have their own separate cultures, and they take all those cultures and they keep them their same cultures, their same ideas and religions and whatever else, but they also contribute those to the greater society and not necessarily lose what their culture really is. So they still have the cultures within the United States, and it's not disbanded and melted into everything else. The culture is still their culture, but it's still a part of the United States. And I think I like that a little bit more as I read more into it. But it was interesting for me as I continued to read these case studies of looking at the different cultures that we may not think about, and that's what the book kind of challenged us with, was the different cultures of in making sure that we understand, looking at the background of things, not just where we come from. So kind of some multicultural ideas. So the different case studies, I have case studies 6.1 through 6.3. DeAndre has case study 6.4 to 6.6. So I'm covering the first three, and he's got the second three. The first one I had was titled "A Home for Marlon" for 6.1. Marlon's 16 years old. He's been in the foster care system since he was 10. He's considered emotionally disturbed, and he's been bounced around to different areas. And Jim Campbell is the director of pupil personnel services at his school. And he read through Marlon's case file and found out that Marlon's case had issues of fire setting in the past, along with some issues of sexual molestation of a couple younger kids. So Jim works with the one of the foster parents that Marlon was set in, the Kearns. So Mrs. Kearns is an aide at the school, so he knows Mrs. Kearns, and his debate during this time is whether or not he should tell Mrs. Kearns about these issues, or whether he should just let this kind of go. He is concerned because the Kearnses have two young kids. They have a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. So his concern is, if Marlon has had this issue in the past, will this happen in the future? So as he's reading through this, he's kind of debating back and forth with himself, and he finally decides to not tell the Kearnses about this, because the Kearnses, the state law says the Kearnses are not allowed to know what has happened with this kid's past, with Marlon's past. So Jim decides not to tell Mrs. Kearns about the past. Now, me personally, as a parent, I think this has changed my viewpoint on things, because in the past I probably would have said, no, students' privacy, you're not supposed to tell and violate students' privacy. But as a parent, I think I would want to know. I think I'm going to disagree with Jim on this one, on his idea, and I think I would go about it in a different way than what Jim probably would have. I probably would have went to Mrs. Kearns and said, "Hey, Mrs. Kearns, I've read his case file. There's something that kind of has a red flag for me. Do you want to know some of this information?" And kind of let her make that call. So if she decides, yes, I'd like to know, then you can lighten them and give very brief, very skim the surface, hey, you might want to watch out for, or maybe protect your kids or something like that. I don't know how exactly I would word it. I hope I never have to come into this scenario, but this is an ethics class, so it's interesting to take a look at that. So I think I would have to disagree with Jim's call there. I know legally he's supposed to make sure that he keeps the student's privacy, but I'm also looking at it as a parent standpoint. I want Marlon to have a fresh start, but at the same time, we can also be cautious as well. Case study number 2 that I had was with Ned Parker. Ned Parker was a principal, and he had a student, Robert. Robert had been in a scenario to where he had been in a divorced home. His father, Frank, had moved him into Ned's district, although it did make mention that it was kind of on the edge of the district. But Frank was tried to be very involved, was involved in PTA. Robert was a big behavior issue. And then this one day in particular, Robert had been brought to the office, and because of some disrespect things, he called Frank, and Frank kind of said, "Hey, this is the last straw." Frank showed up at school, grabbed a hold of Robert, pulled him down the hallway. Well, Ned followed him. Well, Ned following him, Ned witnessed Frank pushing him up against the wall, pointing his finger in his chest, and then it said he basically spanked him. He said no fewer than 8 times. So then Ned had to go into the question of, do I report this to Child Protective Services? Do I report this as child abuse or not? So I tried to put yeses or nos, or positives and negatives on both. To me, I think that some of these cases are a lot harder than last week's on some of the questions. And to me, I don't know what I would do here. I think after reading this and typing out the notes and going back through a couple times, I think I would maybe contact Child Services and just say, hey, here's what I witnessed. Do you think I should file a claim? Or maybe even go to somebody else and say, here's what I witnessed. He's a principal, maybe go to an assistant principal, contact the superintendent. Here's what I witnessed. Do you think I should file a claim? If he doesn't file the claim, and something serious happens to Robert, then Ned can be held criminally responsible for that, which is huge. We're mandated reporters as teachers and administrators, so that's definitely important. So that's always a fear for me. But at the same time, you got to look at the whole spanking thing. Is that considered spanking, or is that too far? Where is that line for some people? So personally, I feel that I might have gone and talked to somebody else and gotten their opinion, or contacted Child Protective Services. But if it was a case of yes or no, I don't have a chance to talk to somebody else. Might be kind of sketchy for me. I think I would probably not report it, because it is, in my opinion, it is spanking. From what I could hear or what I could read in that, I still believe it would be spanking. So, which is, I believe, not illegal. However, I might contact Frank and say, hey, this happened on school grounds. I'm concerned. Can we have a discussion, whether it's over the phone or not? And I know Frank snapped back at him and said, well, this is none of your concern, what I do with my son. And I agree, but it was on school grounds, so I'd have to contact him and say, hey, we can't have this in the school building, and go from there. I probably would not report him, but I would definitely be watching Robert closely. Knowing his background a little bit and seeing that this could happen. This is just if I had a dire yes or no. If it were up to me, I would probably contact somebody else and contact Child Protective Services and see what their thoughts on of it, because I don't want to blow it out of proportion if I don't need to. But again, if it's throwing a red flag to Ned, probably something that he needs to address with somebody else, or definitely the Child Protective Services one. The last one, the Lost in Translation one with Pablo. Pablo is this is 6.3. Pablo is a very new English language learner. He came from Ecuador. Sounded like he was born in the United States, then deported with his mom down in Ecuador, and then she was having issues with his behavior and things down there. Had some issues with some abuse in the schools, was seeing a therapist, and the dad couldn't afford to send money anymore, so they brought him back up to the United States. So it seems like he was very new at this, and was having some behavior issues, considered part of the special education part. And then one day, as Pablo's coming into school, the principal witnesses there's some teachers find out that Pablo was sobbing, was very visibly distraught. So the Spanish teacher was able to talk to Pablo, and Pablo said that he had been hit by a belt that the night before, and then that morning for not eating his meals. So the Spanish teacher's kind of in a dilemma. Does the Spanish teacher tell the full story, knowing that the dad may be illegally there, illegal immigrant, or have an issue, possibly have Pablo sent back? The dad may not know what to do, so might send him back to Ecuador. So the Spanish teacher kind of was in a dilemma on what to do at that case, in that point. So personally, other cultures I know are okay with some of the abuse that we might see as abuse, and they might see as normal. It kind of comes back to case number 2. Is it was it spanking, or was it an actual abuse, hitting with a belt? I think that's a huge question that needs to be addressed as well during all of this too. So personally, if I were the Spanish teacher, I would translate everything that Pablo had said and make sure that is communicated with an administrator, because we are mandated reporters. I would probably contact Child Protective Services, and again, the same thing. As I said for the case study before, hey, here's what he's saying. He struggles with some of his native language, so we may be not translating this properly. He may not be saying this properly. Sometimes kids blow things out of proportion too. I could see that, but maybe bringing that up and then also contacting the father. Might be a way of going about that too, and saying, here's what he said. I'm not sure if the school has the right to do that, but I definitely think the Spanish teacher should tell them and translate that completely. And then once they translate that completely, the question I have is, how can Spanish teacher maybe go about professionally confirming that case? And I mean, not necessarily confirming that case like going in and actually doing all of the research themselves, but another way to kind of see if Pablo's really given the same thing. So, same story. So I'm interested to see what everybody's ideas are this week. I'm excited to have some discussions going back and forth. I may play the devil's advocate a little bit and ask you some questions that might get you thinking a little bit. I hope I can do that. I hope that we can have some good discussions. So look forward to hearing from y'all.